today. Maybe I can just say we want this this format, that if there are any clarification questions during the presentation, which will last for approximately 1 hour, then you may raise your hand. Otherwise, we want more substantial questions after the presentation. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for the kind introduction. Thank you for having me here. I will talk today about the partnership formation in the context of refugee migration in Germany, looking specifically at the case of Syrians and Afghans in Germany. Originally, this project was named actually in the context of recent refugee migrations, but since we had already other refugee migration waves, I kind of amended my title a bit. So this is a joint work with my colleagues in the ERC project, Stefanie Heine, Jana Kuhlemann, and Carlos Palomo Lario. And so we all work together, or let me say, still working together on this topic. Just to let you know, this will not be one single paper, but instead this would be a synthesis of 2 papers which are not yet totally finalized. So I am very much looking forward to your comments and suggestions. Okay. Let me first give you some motivation, how this project started and why I at all started looking at these groups. So mainly in years 2015, 2016, immigrants, refugees from countries, predominantly Syria, but also Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran, started arriving in Germany. And if we look at their demographic composition, which is depicted here on this slide, on this demographic pyramid, you immediately notice a distinct gender disbalance. We see obviously that there are many more men than women. We see men on the left side of the pyramid, women on the right side of the pyramid. And in addition to the fact that there are many more men, and here we see absolute numbers, you immediately also notice that there is particularly oversupply of men in younger ages. Yeah, so you see here, particularly between 18 and something like 35, there are many more men than women. And if we look at, obviously think about the situation when many men from a family or partnership formation age arrived into a foreign country, which is not known for a very large community of co-ethnic from Syria or Afghanistan, immediately a question arises how their partnership formation is going to happen. We know obviously that normally people try, when they're looking for a partner, they try to find someone of similar religion, of similar ethnic group, of similar language. And here we have obviously a problem, or let's say at least a challenge for a group of young people from these countries to find easily a partner. So the research question that we kind of the 3 aims that we had in this when starting this project are the first 2, just to understand how the partnership formation would look like. Second, we were planning to add some theoretical and methodological innovations by incorporating the established or the resident population into our statistical modeling. And second, also to look at the role of social media or online dating in the potential opportunity structures for partnership formation. Okay, I see a question.
Yeah, I was wondering if this includes people who are doing family reunification with somebody who previously arrived as a refugee.
This graph, you mean?
Yeah.
Yes, this graph includes, so this graph was created very early in 2016. So this graph was created in a very early stage of this arrival. It referred to the population from 2013 to 2015, but I have to say that the vast majority of arrivals were in 2015. So basically what we're having here is kind of demographic situation immediately after mass arrival. So all family reunifications, there could be some here, but they're very minor in this picture.
Okay. But we might imagine that a lot of women might follow after the men through family reunification.
Yes, that's exactly the case, that many women were arriving in a couples, but many men, and this is an additional point that I have to mention, is that not only that they're male and young, 70% of them are unmarried. So men arrived unmarried mostly. So, and this is exactly the setting we were trying to address. Many unmarried young men, how they're going to find a partner. And this is, in my opinion, a very interesting and specific situation, not unique. I will refer to that later on in the German history at least, but add some additional components which are relevant. And I can already name them. The additional components is actually the fact that this population is very much internet affinitive. The penetration of mobile phones is as high as almost 100%. And so we might here have some influence of online activities, partnership activities. But this will not be the topic of today's talk. This would be a different topic. Okay, let's move further. So when analyzing partnership formation, we are looking at very famous theories, which are in the field already for quite some years. These are economic theories of marriage. We also look at social exchange theory, very famous Davis and Mertens ideas, and social identity theory, which altogether point to the fact that very often, and exactly what I was talking about, that people strive for some sort of homophily in their partnership search activities. They try to find someone who is similar to them, similar on various characteristics. Based on the seminal work by Matthias Kallmein from the Annual Review of Sociology, we normally in the literature, one refers to three groups of factors when analyzing partnership formation. First of them, and very important, is preferences. So people prefer others of certain characteristic given their own resources. Like, for example, highly educated prefer highly educated, Muslims prefer Muslims, religious people prefer religious people, because homophily is favorable for initiating partnership, but also for maintaining them. Then we refer to the other group of factors, and one of them is relevant others. And this is particularly relevant for other group, which are people from rather collectivistic as opposed to individualistic societies, in which relevant others such as parents, extended family, friends, but also broader social group in which individuals embedded, such as religious community and so on, are able to influence partnership formation. And finally, opportunity structures are very important. People meet other people not in vacuum, they meet them in various places, like hobbies, like their places of work or education, religious activities, but also online, which is a very important venue of finding partners recently. So what will be our contribution, and what I would like to contribute to today is to bring in this other side of the partner market. Until now, the partnership formation was very much individualistic process, focusing on a person who is trying to find a partner and somewhat ignoring the other side, or at least not trying to actively bring the other side into a joint modeling of partnership formation. So our idea, or what I would try to convince you today, is that it's very important to bring in the other side and try to conceptualize and model partnership formation as a two-sided process. Okay, so The two research questions which I will try to address today are, first, do partnership preferences among male refugees and Germany's female resident population at all align? So we will look at this first step of partnership formation, trying to prefer someone else, and raise a question whether, first, refugees are at all interested in partnering with the resident population in Germany, or they just look for their co-ethnics abroad, and at the same time, whether Germany's resident population can imagine any partnership formation with refugees. So it's a very first step of trying to find a form of partnership. In addition, we will look whether the preferences also match the respective characteristics. Let's imagine one group prefer the other group, but what if there are no people of these respective characteristics in the opposite group? Yeah, so this is the first part of the presentation. The second part of the presentation would try to look at actual partnership among refugees, but bring in the attitudes of the resident population and try to connect both. Yeah, so the question will be, do we observe higher rates of partnership with German resident population in regions with more positive attitudes towards partnership with refugees? So here we will actively incorporate the other side into our model. Okay? Okay, let me move to the first question. As I said, this one is more descriptive, trying to figure out, do we see any overlap at all? Okay, let me tell you a little bit about the data, because data is very, very important for this project, as when I was kind of thinking about project and the research question, the first thing I was trying to find the data. And maybe some of you know, Germany has a very nice data set, a German socioeconomic panel, which immediately after arrival of refugees started to collect the data. And actually that demographic pyramid is based on that data source. But when we looked at the data, we found no questions about partnership formation, for different reasons. First of all, they wanted to have a very broad and representative data of the whole refugee group. And obviously, kind of zooming into young male refugees was not their aim. So there was nothing there. So what we decided to collect that data. So we carried out a survey, which is called PARFORM, a survey of male refugees with Syrian and Afghan citizenship who arrived in Germany between 2014 and 2018. Basically, again, I have to say here, the vast majority of our respondents arrived in 2015. Yeah, so this was the key, the largest, when the largest group of refugees arrived. As you see, we also defined age, or let's say years of birth for these refugees, exactly to cover this kind of disbalance in population group. So they are between 18 and 35 at the moment of the data collection. Okay, one important thing to mention, the condition was that they arrived unmarried. To this end, we try to maximize the sample size in order to have substantial enough number of respondents for whom we could observe then partnership formation. The data was collected in years 22-23. You would ask, for how long? Yes, indeed, it was extremely difficult data collection. We didn't know, we didn't anticipate it to be that difficult. It has been for 1.5 years. We were not collecting the data. We tried to outsource the data collection, but it also turned out to be very difficult for our survey institute, the leading survey institute in Germany, to collect the data for young refugee population. Why? First of all, the lists are not very updated because the population is extremely mobile. Sometimes we had like from the number of addresses up to 30 40% of addresses which were no longer updated. So this was very difficult. Just to let you know that the data collection lasted longer than we expected. Anyway, we collected the data. We collected the data for 3,400 male refugees. Their average age is about 28 years old. Now, and they're men, just to remind. Now, what we will do here, we will compare their preference towards partnerships with the preference towards partnership among resident German population. To this end, we relied on already existing data. Maybe some of you know, it's called Children of Immigrants Longitudinal Survey in 4 European countries. It actually was collected in Sweden as well, and in the initial phase. This data refers to the young people of the age cohort with and without migration background. The setting was that it's half a half. So we had an oversampling of young people. Back then, they were teenagers. We started collecting data on them when they were 14 years old. And so to say, people with migration background are predominantly children of immigrants. So what we have here, we have a very similar data collection, which actually occurred in year 22, which is kind of planned to do it together. And people or respondents are basically men and women. But what I will show you today is the preference of female population. These women are approximately 27 years old. So you can imagine here kind of two populations that might eventually meet on the partnership market. Yeah, so refugee men, 28, and resident women, 27. Remember, resident women are not only German women without any migration background, but also could be children of Turkish immigrants or children of Polish immigrants and so on. So what we did, what was in both data sets, we carried out a very similar survey experiment, which looked like as it's shown here. So we represented in a short description of potential partner, and the underlined parts are the parts which are varied. So it says you have met a German woman for Syrian refugees, and for respondents from the SILS population, it could be you have met a Syrian man. This woman is Christian, but religion doesn't play a big role in her life. The woman has never attended university. In general, can you imagine getting married to the woman described? Okay, it's a very straightforward question. You might ask, is it easy to assess it? Yeah, we tried, and our respondents had to give an answer on the scale from 1, least preferred, to 11, most preferred. So let me summarize the dimensions and levels of this vignette. So basically, for the dimensions, we have type of the partnerships. I would not dig deeper into that, but we actually differentiated between marriage, committed romantic relationship, and casual romantic relationship, which is also a contribution to our project to have a differentiated view on the partnerships. Yeah, and then we have also origin, religious denomination, religiosity, and educational attainment. They are identically obvious, apart from origin, where we for the PARFORM refugees, we had German or someone who is neither German nor Syrian but lives in Germany. Basically, this is someone with migration background. And for SILS respondents, we ask about Syrian and Afghan refugees. Okay, so I hope it's clear. Please ask the question if it's not clear. Regarding the design, we had randomized order of vignettes, and we applied so-called de-efficient design. So we didn't use all universe of vignettes and excluded those which were implausible and accounted for that in the analysis. Okay, let me show the findings. So on the left side, you see the order of importance of specific characteristics in selection of partners among refugee men. And on the right side, you see the same for the, as I call it, established women, but it's kind of resident women. Yeah. So what we see here is basically that refugee men emphasize higher education and Muslim religion in their potential partners. If you compare all of these characteristics, we see that these two stand out. Yeah. If you look at the resident women, we see that they actually primarily emphasize non-religiosity. It's significantly different from any other dimension. So basically, if we compare these two, we might notice that on the very top, we don't see an overlap, but there is some overlap. For example, obviously, we have some overlap between non-religiosity and higher education. Yeah, now the question which we might first ask ourselves, okay, we do not have a very straight, very strict overlap, but there is some. Let us have a look whether the preference structure of resident women meets the respective refugee characteristics on the other side. So what I show you now is on the left, the distribution of refugee characteristics as we have them in our data. On the right side is the very same vignette results. So what we can see here is basically the following. Resident women prefer non-religious, highly educated, non-Muslim men, which is not surprising. But the proportion of these men in the whole cohort of refugees is rather small. We see here that non-religious, I mean, this is even not non-religious, this is weakly religious refugees are around 40%, those with high education is about 18%, and non-Muslims the same proportion. So only a portion of refugees would meet the preference structure of the resident women. The majority of refugees are of different profile. They are Muslim, they are more likely to be low educated and religious. So we might indeed have here a certain disbalance. First, some lack of perfect kind of preference alignment, and second, even if there is some preference, there are not enough vis-a-vis of the same characteristics. Now let me draw your attention on this, from the first side, a little bit curious finding that refugee men are so much, put the education so much on the top of their preference list, yeah? So what we did, we tried to look whether it's very specific for the highly educated refugee men, what you see here on the upper part of the graph. This is the same preference structure for highly educated, and in the lower part of the graph, this is the preference structure for less educated, for non-university educated. And what we see here, surprisingly, both groups prefer tertiary educated female from the majority population. Knowing that, or remembering that the like basic principle of partnership formation known for many years is homophily, people preferring very similar to them, they find it that not university educated prefer highly educated partners is somewhat surprising. Yeah, so I would say this highlighted finding is a little bit surprising. So what we did, we actually checked what are their actual partnership structures. So we looked what are the actual partners of refugee men are. And we just did a very simple distribution of partnership characteristic, and we see that, interestingly, the kind of the order of percentages for university refugee men are very much aligned with their preferences, which might mean that actually there is a lot of correlation between your current partnership, and your kind of preferred partnership. Yeah, so this is not necessarily in this case, or at least with the first wave of our data, we could not necessarily use partnership preferences some causal predictor for partnership formation. Could reflect the partnership forms. But for refugees without university education, it's the other way around. It's actually as expected. They do not have partners who are tertiary educated. They rather tend to have partners who are non-tertiary educated, which is actually what you would expect. But interestingly, they prefer partners who are highly educated. So that's why I put a question here in the heading, which is unfortunately very difficult to see because of the Zoom. Maybe our refugees are seeking some sort of vertical social mobility via partnerships. And why we're thinking about that is because while the dominant paradigm in partnership formation is homophily, preferences for partnership with similar interests, attitudes, cultural background, socioeconomic status, there are also other interesting ideas over there. The first, as known, is so-called status maximization. And the idea is basically to secure the best possible mate in face of competition from others. So in the literature, normally this way of partner choice was found mostly among women who are more likely to marry upwards, so to say, to secure a partner of higher socioeconomic status to maximize the utility of the partnership. But here we observe male partners, right? And they are trying to find at least, we cannot say socioeconomically because we just have education, but in principle, a partner with a higher education. We also can look at another idea, which is called exchange theory, where of Dennis Merton, where the idea is that partner with immigrant or refugee partner with preferred characteristics, with a more favorable characteristics on the partner market is preferring a partner with less favorable characteristics. So let's say someone refugee who has high SES occupation, partnering with some woman from the majority population who does not have that characteristic. But this obviously doesn't fit what we see here. So we are kind of inclined to think that the next step should be to better test whether refugees are indeed trying to move up in socioeconomic ladder through partnering someone with a higher, in our case, educational attainment, but in the next wave of our data, we will include another indicator of socioeconomic status, such as SES, and try to figure out whether it's about upward mobility. Okay, let me sum up this part. So what we see here is that women from the resident population obviously emphasize non-religiosity in refugees as potential partners. And you should remember that the resident population are not only German women without any German, without any non-German background. We have here almost half of the sample. These are people whose parents or themselves as children were migrants. So basically, and we checked it actually by both groups separately, and we find very similar preference structure. So non-religious partner is preferred irrespectively of the group which I mentioned. But what we see, the majority of male refugees are indeed Muslim, low educated, and stronger religious. So we might have here disbalance already. Refugee men emphasize education in their potential partner from the resident population. So, and what we see, even less educated refugees prefer highly educated partners. So we kind of want to raise an important question whether this preference is an attempt of potential status maximization in the hierarchy of the receiving society. Okay, if there are any questions now to the first part, just short clarification questions. So I will then, yeah, please, here I see one.
Yeah, hi, just one clarification question. Did you, how do you, in the survey experiment, what was the setting of this experiment? Like, kept you the physical attraction constant, like with the sentence, okay, the person's generally attractive to you in physical terms? Because I would
the
assume
attractiveness. So basically, let me return to the text. This was the text. We didn't have anything about physical attractiveness, and the idea was that basic idea was that physical attractiveness should not vary across the groups, which is a kind of an assumption. Assumption doesn't have maybe to be so. We collected information on attractiveness for our respondents. We collected information on attractiveness of their partners. So, but in the experiment, we did not include attractiveness as a criteria. I know while pre-testing, indeed, there was many comments on this end, but was attractiveness and some other figures. We did not go for that issue because we considered it to be not correlated with the other dimensions like religiosity, religion, education, and origin. That's why we avoided.
Okay.
Besides, this was, you can imagine this, this was a questionnaire, so first wave questionnaire of about 45 minutes. And we had 6 descriptions, so 6 vignettes. It was already a lot. And you have to try to keep respondents in the sample. So that's why we try to avoid drop out as much as possible. Okay, so let me move to the second part, which will be built on this part. So now we move to the second part where we ask the question, actually, are exogamy rates higher in the areas where members of resident population are more open towards partnership? So let me first give you some definitions. By exogamy, we understand intermarriage or in a partnership across the various lines, be it religious lines or national lines or language lines. In our case, we will look at the partnership across national lines. So this would be exogamy, would mean having a partner with someone who does not belong to the same national origin, which means for Syrians is not Syrian and for Afghans is not Afghan. Okay? Good. So we will test 2 hypotheses which are easily derivable from the theories which I mentioned earlier, above all the social identity theory and kind of group interactions models, which would show that we could expect that the more positive the attitudes toward partnership with refugees are, the stronger the exogamy, right? So the more favorable the majority population to the refugees, the more likely refugees to partner with the majority. The second hypothesis would dig deeper into specific characteristics which you have seen right now, and claiming or arguing or hypothesizing that the stronger exogamy for refugees with characteristics which are strongly preferred by the established population, the stronger the exogamy. The characteristics which I would be looking at are along dimensions of religion, religiosity, and education. So these are the very same dimensions we were just talking about, because we would be using very similar survey experiment on this. Okay. Again, to the data, we use the same PARFORM data. Yeah, so now you see this very same data. Now here we have the sample size. The overall sample is 3,400 individuals, and we have 931 individuals in a current partnership. So this is our analytic sample. We're looking at individuals who are in a current partnership. And partnership is defined as any type of relationship. You saw that it could be marriage, it could be committed relationship, and it could be casual relationship. We gave some definitions in the questionnaire. Casual relationship are relationship which individuals do not think are stable or long-lasting, and it could include very, very casual encounters, including kind of short sexual encounters. So it's very, very open definition here. We will not differentiate by the type in this analysis, or actually because of the sample size, but in principle, it includes all possible types of relationships. We also carried out some Heckman selections models here, trying to figure out whether those who do not have relationship are systematically different from those who have relationship, and we do not find any significant biases caused by the fact that we have some people who are not in a relationship. And now let's look at the right part of my slide, and it refers to yet another data set which I will introduce. So this is so-called JIP panel. It's called German Internet Panel. This is a panel which runs at the University of Mannheim. It's actually it was a very nice thing. It was introduced within a special, it's called Sonderforschungsbereich, it's a research collaborative area for many years ago, and it was introduced actually to capture the quick changes in the attitudes of the German population. It kept running because it was used during the COVID pandemic to ask about different attitudes, and it stayed at the University of Mannheim. It's a very, very nice instrument where anyone from the University of Mannheim can submit some ideas, modules, item batteries at any time, and it very quickly and unbureaucratically processed. So it was very, very helpful. That's why we decided to introduce a survey experiment very similar to what I have shown you, which we introduced in our data, also to this data. This data, as you see, is a representative panel survey of the German population, of the whole German population. So the data was fielded in March 22, at the very beginning of our data collection. And actually, the original idea was to repeat it several times in order to capture changes in the attitudes. But due to very long data collection in our PARFORM data, this idea did not really realize, because all data collections here kind of fell into our first PARFORM data collection. The data is collected in computer assisted mode. We had here again a very similar factorial survey with 6 vignettes per respondent. Again, this efficient design. And you see we have evaluation of more than 20,000 vignettes by about 3,500 people. You might ask why another data set. So here the idea was actually to look at the general perception in the German population of the partnership with the refugee. So you can imagine that the German population is not very young. Actually, the German population is on average almost 50 years old. So obviously, this is not very relevant for 50 years old to marry or partner with someone refugee. So that's why we had to formulate a vignette in somewhat different way, which we did, and we did it like that. A female relative marries a man who came to Germany as a refugee from Syria a few years ago. This man is Christian, but religion doesn't play a big role in his life. He has a university degree. So basically what we did, we changed this setting. It's not about you as a respondent preferring partnership with someone, but now people have to think, how would I react to someone from my family who is dating someone Syrian, dating someone Afghan? So in this way, we're trying to capture a more general perception in the society, on the societal level, whether partnering someone from a refugee population is positively assessed or less positively assessed. Other than that, you see very similar, not here. I think I kicked it out. Very similar dimensions, very similar layers. Again, we ignore here the types of the partnership, and we will also ignore whether someone's Syrian Afghan, because frankly speaking, German population does not really have different attitudes towards Syrian Afghans. They are very, very similar. Okay, now the analytic strategy would be the following. We will run a set of logistic regressions, clustering on our standard errors on some sort of, as I call it, locality unit, which is a cross-tabulation of the federal state and community size of the city or town where our respondents live. So basically, we will create a number of clusters, and we will produce a measurement, or so as we call it, index of attitudes at this higher level, at the cluster level. Okay. So basically, for you to understand how big is this cluster, I will show a couple of examples. Actually, it's more or less a size of a city. If it's medium-sized city, or it's a conglomeration of several villages, if it's something small. Okay. Why we're doing that? We would obviously prefer to go to a tiniest possible locality for the sample size. So we have just overall 3,500 individuals, so we cannot go into very, very low level in order to produce some reliable estimates. Our dependent variable is a probability of partnership with a person from an origin different than one's own. So it's basically not partnering with co-nation, somewhat different. Could be German, could be someone else. Our key predictor, or our very important, the index which we were looking at, is the acceptance of partnership with refugees among the German resident population. And here it's important distinction I want you to draw attention to. First, we will try to have an overall index. So basically, you saw our dimensions in vignettes. In the overall index, we ignore them. We just aggregate them into one index per cluster. Okay, so basically, if we were just not having any vignettes, we could ask our respondents, would you see your relative partnering someone from Syria? And this index would be our indicator. In the alternative specification, we will use all the information we gain by having it in a vignette form. So by having it in the detailed form, by having it differentiated by education, religion, and religiosity. So now it's not just a very general attitude towards partner and a refugee, it's a very differentiated one. It's an attitude towards a partner and a refugee who could be highly educated, lowly religious, and non-Muslim, let's say. And what we will do, we will assign this index in the data to our refugees who match in the characteristics. Yeah, so let's say I will give you an example. We will have, like, say, index 7 for someone who is highly educated, lowly religious, and Christian. So a refugee in our data set who has these characteristics will get this as an independent variable. Okay, I will show you example. Maybe if it's not clear, it will become clear. So basically, we take this exogenous variable of attitudes and make it individual variable for the refugee who has these characteristics. Our control variables cover the three possible sources of influence when we talk about partnership formation: individual characteristics, education, partnership, parents' education, willingness of long-term settlement in Germany, third-party influences, whether respondent met his partners through family relatives, whether family or respondent choose the partner, and opportunity structures such as share of in-group members in main activity, in-group sex ratio in the cluster level, relative group size in cluster level, and index of national heterogeneity in cluster. So basically, we try to have all those other opportunity structures measures taken out of our attitudinal index. Yeah. Okay, let me give you some descriptives. So here you see the probability of a refugee having a non-national partner, by this cluster. Obviously, you see the coding of cluster is very complex. On the right side, you see some kind of index, how to read it. I don't know whether you should go into detail. I don't know whether you know German federal states so much, but on the right, you see our federal states, and they are cross-classified with the size of the community. So as you see above on this figure, we have Schleswig-Holstein, which is on the very north, not very far from Denmark. And this is the community of the size between 100,000 individuals and 500,000 individuals. And as you see here, the probability of having a partner in someone non-national there is 19%. In the very here on the opposite side, we have Bavaria, with the size of the community between 100,000 and 500 individuals. And there the probability for refugee of partnering someone who is non-national is about 40%. You would say, wow, this is a lot. This is kind of very significant. Compare that to the probability of having a German partner. And you see here the variance is between 6% and 26%. So you see a very large proportion of those partnering non-nationals are actually those who are partnering someone different than German. Okay. And now let me show you another piece of information which shows us the attitudes of the resident population towards partnership with Germans by locality, by clusters. On the x-axis, you have the score in the partnership acceptance scale. And on the y-axis, you have a percentage of individuals who express that type of attitudes. We differentiate between the two categories available. So the upper left figure shows us assessment of partnership by a refugee's religion. So what you see in blue is the partnership with Muslims, in red are the partnership with Christians, and what you see overall, the general population is more favorable towards partnership with Christians. It's on the upper part of the scale, whereas it's less favorable towards the partnerships with Germans in general. So you see, and there is some overlap in some localities. Yeah? It's on locality level, on the cluster level. The next figure shows the assessment of partnership by refugees' religiosity. It's the figure on the right, upper right side. And here you see also, as expected, less preferred or less accepted are partnerships with highly religious, and more accepted are partnerships with lowly religious. And finally, by education, we see also a picture which we would find in the literature, where we say that the partnership with lowly educated are less preferred, and the partnership with highly educated are more preferred. And we have, in any case, some overlaps in localities, which shows that we have a very nice variation here across clusters. But obviously, we have just 15 clusters. This is not a lot. So the results, which I will show you, as you see on the confidence and intervals, are not statistically significant in the sense that we cannot generalize much from these 15 clusters. But we have very strong effects. So basically, for our 15 clusters, we have a rather strong effect, and I will try to walk you through. On the left graph, you see the correlation between the score in the partnership acceptance scale on the x-axis and probability of a current partner being cross-national or non-national on the y-axis. And the line shows the correlation between the two. In the left figure, what we see is the overall acceptance index. So imagine that you are or someone is asked, what is your attitudes when your family member marries someone Syrian? So if you receive this question, you will give an answer, and your kind of acceptance scale would be hardly correlated with the actual partnership formation. This is our left, more or less flat line, practically no correlation. But once you're asked specifically, you kind of give a person, give a respondent a possibility to differentiate between characteristic of a refugee. You get an index which start to be pretty much correlated with the probability of a partnership, which what you see on the right-hand side. So basically, you see here that the difference between a cluster, a locality, where respondents say their preference is on a rather low level, 5 in our scale between 1 and 11, there only 20% of refugees could be partnered across their national line. If, however, someone lives in a locality where the majority, knowing the characteristic of a refugee, gives a score 8.5, then the probability of partnership for a refugee will be as high as 40%. So we have a kind of a difference of 20% points between the polls in this assessment. So here the index, the characteristics index, is a combination of all three factors: education, religion, and religiosity, which is not strictly allowed because we have this de-efficient design. Actually, we are allowed to do only two-way interactions. So that's why I show you also the kind of how the correlations looks if we have all two-way interactions. And you see they show a correlation which comes closer to the one that we see with the three-way interaction. So it's obviously stronger. So let's put it this way. The more information people know, the more information people have about a refugee, the more likely we have a predictor which is strongly correlated with the outcome, with the partnership formation pattern of the refugee. Okay, and finally, we test the second hypothesis, where we claim that they will observe the stronger exogamy for refugees with the characteristics which are more preferred by the majority. So we do a very similar exercise. We interact the attitudes, given the respondents these specific characteristics which we are looking at each of the figures, and interacting it with the partnership formation pattern, with the partnership kind of pattern of a respondent, of a refugee, with that specific characteristic. So let me put it other way, it's a little bit complicated. So we get an attitude towards a refugee in the first figure in the left upper part, who is Muslim or non-Muslim, and give this attitude as a variable into the data set of refugees and interact it with the religion of the respondent. So what we have is the following pattern. Actually, in all of the figures, that the characteristic of a refugee, which is stronger preferred in the population, which is non-Muslim, lowly religious, and more educated, is actually stronger correlated with the attitudes of the majority to a refugee with this particular characteristic. So to say, if someone, let's have a look at the religion, if an attitude towards non-Muslims is very favorable, like in the communities where its index is 8, the probability of non-Muslims partnering with the majority is about, how much? 42%. And if the attitudes is rather low, let's say in the locality with 6.5 on the index, there the probability of partnering is around 27%. We also see that there is slightly positive correlation for Muslims, which actually indicates that we indeed have some respondents who are Muslims. And if they are favorable towards Muslims, they will also have a little bit, but not that pronounced increase in partnership probability. The pattern is the same for religiosity. So to say, the more favorable the population is towards non-religious or lowly religious, then more likely these people to partner with the majority population or the resident population. But this doesn't play any role if someone is very highly religious. So only preferred feature is the one in which refugees, I would say, could capitalize when they looking for partnerships. Now the question, what happens with the education here? This is very curious. So the pattern is as expected. The higher the acceptance of highly educated, the more likely refugees are to partner with a majority. But somehow we have actually a rather flat line for lowly educated, but at a rather high level. Actually, at communities with very low acceptance, we have a situation that lowly educated are more likely to be partnered with the resident population. We looked into it, and actually we have here an interesting pattern that we observe that in localities with a rather low acceptance rate in small German, sorry. Small German localities, native-born Germans are more likely to partner with refugees. So we have to, I think it's here, the analysis start to be rather qualitative. So we are going into very separate localities to look what's going on there. It could, anything could happen. We have several speculations. If you want to hear them, we can discuss in the Q&A section. They're very speculative. That's why I don't think they should go into recording. That's why I will, if there is interest, we can discuss it later. Okay, let me sum up. So we started with the hypothesis that general kind of overall strong acceptance of refugees might work in a form of some welcoming culture or general openness to rather intimate, close relationship to refugees, which would be associated with stronger exogen. I would say it depends on the measure. If we use a very general measure, which we have in the very general surveys, like European Social Survey and any other survey, we have a question general, what is your attitude towards immigrants? What is your attitude towards refugees? And we have a score. If we use this score, it's not, at least we show, it doesn't have a very strong prediction towards, at least here, a partnership formation pattern. But, and basically our idea is that respondents think about a very stereotypical refugee, yeah, which we could imagine what characteristics this person could have, but it's a very stereotypical one. Now, if we use a survey experiment kind of setting, where we spell out characteristics of the refugee, and particularly characteristic related to cultural components such as religion or religiosity or some sort of socioeconomic one as in education, we're getting an index which starts to be a much stronger predictor of an actual behavior on the other part of the partnership market. So I would say it's very important to get this characteristics tailored index, because if we think about actual situation on the partner market, when people just generally ask, they think very stereotypically, and many of the majority population does not have very positive stereotypes possibly about refugees. But if you are really know someone, or if you really know someone in your family and this refugee maybe is already kind of is present in your family, you get to know this person, you know that this person has specific characteristics, your attitudes to these persons changes, so contact hypothesis and so on, and you might express more positive attitudes toward this person, or the contrast, maybe very negative attitudes toward this person, if it's a different characteristic, not preferred characteristics, which start to be a strong predictor of the behavior. And what we in the end find also stronger exogamy for refugees with characteristics more strongly preferred by the population. We have some nuances depending on the nature of exogamy. I showed you results for partnerships with co-nationals. We also, with others rather than co-nationals, so with cross-nationals. We also had findings for Germans, which slightly deviate from the ones I showed you. So, but overall, the findings seem to be overall robust in the general message that if characteristics are preferred, then there is a more favorable attitudes and stronger, higher chances for the other part to get into partnership. So let me sum up. Actually, I sum up. I want just to show you where we are going with the project. It's not yet in the end of, we're not in the end of our journey. We have almost two more years to go. And currently we're analyzing some egocentric data on our refugees, which we actually asked our respondents to name 3 female persons in their most immediate network who are not their partners and who are not their immediate family members, like mothers, sisters, and so on. And we asked what relationship they are and what are these people, some characteristics of these people, but we also asked them, can you imagine having a relationship with this person? And now we are analyzing this data, and I have to say that the results are going in a very similar direction as our vignettes. But in vignettes, we have a very hypothetical person, and here we have we try to figure out a preferred person out of the set of available women in a network. But the patterns appears to be very, very similar, where we see that given the opportunities, given the actually quite the number of women in a network who are German or who are not co-national, our respondents still prefer partners based on their rather cultural characteristics, who is more religious, who is more tend to be from the same ethnic group as anything else, and sociodemographic characteristics tend to play less significant role. We also carry out other analysis like compare partnership formation of German native-born and established immigrants and recent refugees. We also started having some panel analysis because the second wave of our data is available, where we can carry out more causal kind of type-oriented analysis. However, we kind of implemented survey experiments in wave 1 and wave 3. So wave 3 is still in the field. We also have, there was a question about attractiveness. We do have attractiveness information on respondents, so we are able to run some analysis on kind of this thesis of status maximization, so whether attractive refugees are able to trade their positive trait against some other characteristic, and we have some interesting results coming up. And finally, we're also looking on the role of internet in enhancing or reducing partnership exogamy, and there we have also some interesting findings. Okay, thank you very much. Oops, sorry. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward for your questions.